In this exciting episode, Perry goes parochial as he attempts to figure out who is the real granddaughter of Charles Burroughs. It puts him in direct contact with a pause-happy preacher, a floundering father, a mumbling minister. Well, you can't blame a guy for trying to make the title alliterative, can ya? It's Season 2, Episode 20 of Perry Mason, The Case of the Stuttering Bishop. Welcome to the Perry Pod. I'm your humble host, Jonathan Searcy, and my purpose here is pretty simple: provide an audio companion to the greatest legal drama in television history, Perry Mason. I plan to do a pod for every episode of the television series, and as time permits, I'll look at some of those made-for-TV movies too. I'll be working through the series in the order in which the episodes were aired. Each episode I'll give a brief refresher on the plot, and if the episode was based on a novel, I'll compare the book with its television adaptation. Next, I'll list some key pieces of trivia, as well as tackle the episode's main theme. We'll feature a Perry proverb, a moment of wisdom from the man himself, and then we'll finish with a post-case water cooler, where just like Perry, Della, and Paul, we can rehash the ins and outs of their adventures. But first, to the law library! Each episode in the law library, we return to prior cases to refresh our memories about Perry's past so we can find fresh precedents for future cases. This episode features a judge demanding that a prosecution witness get a once-over for a perjury charge.
Mr. Weston, I would like the testimony of this witness to be examined for possible charges of perjury at the conclusion of this hearing.
Perjury is, of course, willfully lying under oath. We've seen the offense come up a couple of times in past Perry episodes, most prominently in the case of the Sunbather's Diary.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you've just heard the testimony of Detective Myers. It completely contradicts the testimony of the previous witness. I therefore ask you to bring in an indictment for perjury against Perry Mason.
That's right! Our man in L.A. was staring down a loaded perjury gun. Fortunately, Berger made the mistake of calling Perry to the stand at the murder trial and letting him basically conduct his own case as a witness. Another potential case that comes to mind is Season 2's The Case of the Footloose Doll, wherein Senator Baylor implicitly gives false testimony concerning the reason for his ailing arm.
You're unable to raise your right hand, Senator, because of an attack of bursitis in your right shoulder?
Or are you unable to raise it because of a wound from an ice pick?
A wound from an ice pick?
That's right.
Mr. Mason, this is a very grave accusation.
I realize that, Your Honor. And with all due respect, I would suggest that the court appoint a physician to examine the senator's right shoulder.
That won't be necessary. Mr. Mason is correct.
Now, does the senator have to pay for his perjurious testimony? Probably not. Good old boy politics, plain and simple. Although I will say it's highly unlikely he's going to win that re-election bid. Well, let's focus on telling the truth and get to the plot of this episode. The Case of the Stuttering Bishop. Arthur Mallory is a bishop just minding his own business when Arnold Lang and Leo Castor come a-calling.
It's rather late to be doing research, isn't it?
We work around the clock.
May I see your identification?
Show him your identification, Leo.
I must have left it in my other suit.
You'll have to forgive him, Bishop. He's always forgetting things.
You're working for Charles Burroughs, aren't you?
I thought I was asking the questions. Did you find the girl?
The bishop was taking a sabbatical from Australia, trying to track down the child he gave to some foster parents many years ago. What he got for his trouble from Messieurs Lang and Coster was the wrong end of a blunt instrument, while nondescript instrumental music covers over his screams.
All right, Leo.
The next thing Mallory knows, he's being helped by a young woman named Carol Delaney, who is the very person he was looking for. She hears his story and thinks Lang and Castor's blows have knocked a few marbles loose.
All right, Leo.
Her guy friend, the man sporting pants hiked to the middle of his chest, Larry Kenyon, thinks the bishop's story may have merit. And when Lang and Castor show up at Carol Delaney's door, she begins to think the bishop's story is on the up and up too.
Now, why don't you be a good girl and forget all about this?
Otherwise?
Otherwise, you might be buying yourself a lot of trouble. You play ball with that phony bishop, and Mr. Burroughs is bound to feel that you're just as crooked as Mallory is. You know the old saying, birds of a feather?
I think you've said just about enough.
So do I.
The bishop and Carol go to see Perry, and the bishop gives us a vaguely spiritual answer when asked about his motives.
I would say that a fee of $50,000 is not unreasonable.
Bishop Mallory, what's your interest in this?
There are rewards other than financial.
Della is less intrigued by the bishop's doctrinal particulars than his speech impediment.
That's the first time I've ever heard a stuttering bishop. He must be quite a sensation in the pulpit.
Perry's on the case. He goes to see Charles Burroughs and talk things over with this $5 or $6 million man. Burroughs loves the woman who appears to be his granddaughter, and he ridicules the man who really is his nephew.
Mr. Mason is here.
Well, what are you waiting for? Applause? Tell him to come in.
Really, Uncle Charles? Sometimes you can be...
Perry doesn't get too far with the old skinflint. In fact, Burroughs has plans to make the dilemma of his granddaughter's identity go away entirely.
I'm signing a new will. I'm leaving everything to Janice. Notice I didn't say I'm leaving everything to my granddaughter. I said to Janice. I'll specify it makes no difference whether she's related to me or not.
Perry gives CB something to mull over as he leaves.
I've just one question. If you make the type of will you describe, isn't that an unconscious admission that you're afraid Miss Burroughs' claim won't hold up? Think it over.
The next night, Perry gets a visit from the unctuous nephew who makes what appears to be a bribe. When the nephew goes home, he and the ersatz granddaughter come across a little case of murder, and all the nephew is missing is a mustache to twirl as he works out a way of getting some of his now deceased uncle's cash.
Now, my dear, you know what a mercenary soul I am. And if I'm any judge of things, Uncle Charles didn't leave me a sou.
I'll give you $10,000.
No, my dear. You'll give me 50% of the estate.
Well, I'd have to discuss that with...
Mr. Lang, oh, there isn't time. Make up your mind, dear. Time's a-fleeting.
Tragg arrests Carol Delaney after it turns out the murder weapon came from her carving set, and Bishop Mallory is apparently on the lam, so that's bad news for all involved. Meanwhile, Perry's got a new sparring partner in the courtroom. It's Deputy D.A. Weston.
I thought by this time that Mr. Berger would be free. I've just received word requesting that I continue with the hearing since he is still unavailable.
You may proceed, Mr. Deputy.
Perry makes a point about the ambiguous time of death. Then he goes for the kill. That means first getting rid of the aspersions cast by Arnold Lang, exposing that Lang and the fake granddaughter are man and wife?
And how would you describe your relationship with Miss White? Would you say you were good friends?
I'd like to think so.
And nothing more?
Isn't that enough?
If it please the court, I would like to introduce in evidence, subject to identification, a certified copy of a marriage license made out to Wallace Lang and Mildred White. Miss White is also known as Janice Burroughs.
Then Mason exposes the melodramatic play acting of Philip Burroughs.
What about the blood on the carpet?
What about the blood? I say it's just some more of your dressing the stage. But let's have it analyzed. Let's see if it matches the blood type of the man you murdered.
Finally, Perry plays priest to Carol as the bishop happens to be dead. Perry's purpose, reunite Carol and her estranged mother. Nice work, Perry! One question. Carol got the money, right? If so, maybe that means goodbye to Larry Kenyon and is expecting a flood pants. The 1936 novel, The Case of the Stuttering Bishop, was turned into a forgettable 1937 film, so we're going to ignore that adaptation and focus on the novel, which features the following differences from the television adaptation. Number one, the defendant in the novel is not the potential granddaughter, the equivalent of Carol Delaney. It is the mom, i.e. the woman who married the millionaire's son and had the baby in the first place. Number two, the means of murder, way different. In the book, the millionaire gets plugged with a bunch of bullets and his car goes into a nearby body of water. This leads to a fine legal point Perry makes in court concerning the deceased's cause of death. Did he die from bullet wounds or did he drown? Number three difference, Bishop Mallory lives? Yes, indeed. Number four, the person who plugged the millionaire with bullets was the mom of the ersatz granddaughter. What? And the detectives, the equivalents of Lang and Castor from the show, are the ones who rolled the deceased's car into the water. Very interesting. Number five, Della almost gets killed by one of those detectives when Perry has her disguised as the real granddaughter of the millionaire. This leads to Perry breaking the detective's nose. Rock'em sock'em Perry Mason. Number six, the stuttering of the bishop is attributed to an emotional shock made in the wake of the bishop discovering the fake granddaughter. It's an excellent, excellent novel, but no, we don't get any clarity about Perry's church membership or whether he's just a C&E man. I guess we'll have to wait for the case of the delinquent devotee, won't we? Let's get trivial, shall we? Each episode in our trivia section, I give you 3 takeaways. A Paul is a subject worth investigating more. Adela is something about a particular actor or actress in the episode. And a Perry is something we learn about our intrepid hero. Our Paul for this episode involves that fancy putting machine Charles Burroughs has in his office. You put the ball in the hole and the thing spits it right back out at you. Obviously, audio isn't the best way to experience this contraption. You'll have to check it out for yourself.
You know, Mason, you surprised me. I didn't think a man of your ability would be so gullible.
So here's the prompt. When exactly was this putting machine with patented ball return action invented? And how much would it have cost Charles Burroughs in 1960 to get his hands on one of those bad boys? Was this putting machine a signifier of millionaire decadence? Our Della for this episode happens to be Hubie Kearns, better known as the skin diver who locates the bishop's car.
This is your idea of a practical joke, Sonny.
It's no joke, Lieutenant. You ought to give me credit for having a little sense. It was...
Believe it or not, Kearns was nearly 40 years old when this episode aired. How's that for some serious youthful looks? Kearns is best known for being Adam West's stunt double in the 1960s television series Batman, and Kearns is a Stuntman Hall of Famer. Yep, there's a Stuntman Hall of Fame, and Hubie Kearns is in it. Kearns, born in 1920, played halfback at the University of Southern California and qualified for the Olympics twice in track and field, though his service in the U.S. Army during World War II prevented him from competing. By the way, he set a service record in the 4x40 while he was enlisted. From the late 40s to the early 1970s, Kearns worked on a number of Hollywood pictures and TV shows. The rare film with him on screen as an actor was 1947's Jim Thorpe, All-American, where he appeared opposite Burt Lancaster, the titular Thorpe, as one of Thorpe's rivals. He was apparently also James Mason's stunt double in North by Northwest in the late 1950s. Totally fascinating. Both Kearns' son and daughter followed their dad in the stuntman business, or stunt person business in his daughter's case, and Kearns died from cancer in Van Nuys, California at the age of 78. Our Perry for this episode concerns Perry's rising and falling stock in the eyes of one eccentric millionaire.
You know, Mason, you surprise me. I didn't think a man of your ability would be so gullible. Now you're using your head. You know, Mason, you're supposed to be smart.
Let's just say that anyone this fickle and superficial in their evaluation of Mason, someone who thinks Mason's not smart because they don't agree with themselves, or is smart because they see the same thing they do, well, they're not headed anywhere fast. Our theme for this episode is play acting. I find Philip Burrows pretty hard to take. He's Vincent Pricing out of control throughout the episode and threatening to scratch his eye with all of his malevolent, snidely whiplash mustache twirling.
It might make all the difference in the world.
I think the reason Phil, as Lang delightfully calls him, seems so out of place in this episode is that he appears to think he's in a community theater production while everyone else is in a television episode.
My uncle rarely makes a mistake. I'd be less than human if I weren't delighted at one of his few errors.
Now, Philip clues us into his game when he uses theatrical terminology with Mildred White.
My uncle rarely makes a mistake. I'd be less than human if I weren't delighted at one of his few errors.
Perry comes back to that same terminology when he pins Philip to the wall on the stand.
I say it's just some more of your dressing the stage. But let's have it analyzed.
Yes, Philip certainly is guilty of the crime. Less offensive, but no less important, he's a bad actor. And in Perry's world, that's a fatal combination. Now, it's time for a Perry proverb. So, we've got a bishop, but Arthur Mallory is too busy making vague pronouncements about spiritual reward to get in any liturgical work. No Apostles' Creed, no baptisms, no hints to wedding vows or distributing the Lord's Supper from this guy while he's still on screen. That means it's up to Perry to do the serious counseling work at the episode's end. And here he grounds his call for forgiveness in the profound spiritual fact that everyone makes mistakes.
A human being, Carol. She made a mistake, as all of us do.
Another successful intervention by Pastor Perry. Don't forget to tithe, Janice. You've got more than enough money to do so now. Let's grab a swig from the water cooler.
You know, there is one thing I don't understand.
Go on, Paul.
Our Paul prompt from the last episode involved nursing caps. We asked,
Don't all nurses wear caps?
Yes, sir. But each school of nursing has its own distinctive cap, and a nurse graduating from an institution will wear its cap for the rest of her professional life, no matter where she may work.
I see.
Was the whole nursing cap by school actually a thing? Or was it a bit of television fiction invented to satisfy the episode's plot machinations? My dad's research showed that the reference in the case of the caretaker's cat to a unique nurse cap from which a person could identify the nursing school attended by the wearer was not an artificial Hollywood construct, but rather something that was based in reality. The practice dates from 1874, where the Bellevue Hospital School of Nursing in New York City adopted a special nursing cap as a way to identify nurses who had graduated from there. As the number of nursing schools increased, so too did the need for unique caps. Each nursing school decided to design their own style, and some became very elaborate. And because each school had their own cap, it became very easy to determine from which school the nurse had graduated. Nancy, another listener, wrote in to say that she spoke with her sisters who went to nursing school in the 1960s, and they confirmed that each nursing school did have its own distinctive cap, and that is what you wore no matter where you worked. Here were two anecdotes. One, I'm sure that more than one school somewhere had a cap like St. Joe's, but I never ran into one. And when we went to Westchester County, Harrison, New York for our psychiatric experience, there were students from two other schools, and their caps were very different. Then I worked at Toronto Western Hospital, and there were nurses from England, Ireland, South Africa, Toronto, and some Asian nurses, and I never saw a cap like mine. And the other sister said, that's true. Each school had a distinctive cap. You would know where a nurse was from the minute you saw her. And some of those caps were really weird. Absolutely fascinating. Thank you, Dad and Nancy. Nancy also included at the end of her message another bit of trivia, which is this. Judy Lewis, the actress who portrayed Winifred Oakley in the episode, was the daughter of Loretta Young and Clark Gable. She mentioned to me, I'm sure you know the backstory on that. I did not know the backstory on that, but now I do. Gable and Young had an affair while they were co-starring together. Gable was married. Young gave birth to Lewis, kept her hidden in orphanages for 19 months before Lewis was reunited with Young. Gable's identity as Lewis's father remained hidden from Lewis until she was 31, which means that when Lewis was portraying Winifred Oakley, she still didn't know that Clark Gable was her dad. I did not know that. Thanks for cluing me in. Tim also wrote that he got a kick out of the Dabo Sweeney reference in our last episode. We're in Clemson country over here, Tim. We're mandated by county ordinance to use Sweeney's trademark all-in phrase at least once a month. So I was just getting mine in on the air. As always, I'd love feedback about this particular episode or the podcast in general. Was there something about this episode you'd like to comment on or something you'd like to correct? You can email me at theperrypod@gmail.com. You'll find that link in the show notes. All PerryPod episodes are available via Spotify, YouTube, and iTunes. Thanks again for joining me on the pod journey. Join us next time as Perry stops talking about play acting and metaphors and actually ventures into the world of theater. It's the case of the lost last act. Join me, won't you? Until then, this is Jonathan Searcy saying, keep on walking that Park Avenue beat!